Hello everyone, my name's Katie Sandow and I'm founder of the Marketing Forum, and we're here today at the brand new Watergate Bay Hotel and Beach Retreats offices called The Hangar. We are recording a live podcast and live event film with 3 amazing speakers on the power of PR. We're working in collaboration with WildCard, and we've got Georgie Upton, Managing Director of WildCard. We have Kate Wild, the Chief Exec and Founder of WildCard, and we've got Judi Blakeburn, the Brand Director for Watergate Bay Hotel and Another Place Hotels. This space is called The Hangar, and this cafe is called the No. 1 Cubs Cafe. And then next door there is some brand new hot desking facilities that are open to the public for everyone to use. I really hope you enjoy this live event and podcast. Hello everyone and welcome to the Marketing Forum. We are here today in collaboration with WildCard PR to talk about the power of PR. So we're going to be talking about campaigns, print versus digital. We're going to be talking about how to do it really well. And we have a wonderful panel here with us to go through that. So firstly, my name is Katie Sandow and I'm founder of a marketing studio called Sandow Studio, which specialises in consultancy and projects, and of course, the Marketing Forum. So the Marketing Forum is a few years old now, actually, and as is written on the front of my brand new postcards, which I'm sure you'll all be delighted to have in your bags, it's really about 3 things: learning, connecting, and collaborating. So one of the things that I think you have when you're in small marketing teams, communication teams, or in a creative role, is you might not have access to informal professional development. And so the Marketing Forum was really founded to give you access to conversations like these with people who have got so much experience and knowledge that they can share. Connection, because obviously network is so important in career nowadays, and collaboration, because you might need to outsource quite a lot of work or collaborate with peers. And what we're trying to facilitate through the Marketing Forum is all of those things in one. So I will start by introducing our lovely panel. Firstly, Kate Wild, thank you so much for joining us, founder and CEO of WildCard. And I believe you've just finished a year of being the High Sheriff of Cornwall?
Yes, that actually finished in April. So, yeah. So important people. We also have Judi Blakeburn. Judi is the brand director for Watergate Bay Hotel and Another Place Hotels. We have tortured Judi with one of these events before, and also the podcast, and absolutely love her thinking around marketing. So thank you so much for joining us again. And Georgie Upton, and Georgie is managing director of WildCard. And am I not making up that you've been 20 years?
I know, I don't look old enough, do I? I mean, let's just say, no, yes, 20 years working with Kate, started in London, now down in Cornwall, and now I'm lucky enough to oversee the business from
a few
down
years
here.
Off in the middle.
Yeah, I had a few years off somewhere else.
I had my eye on
Spread my wings and came back.
So lots of knowledge here for us to pick the brains of. So Kate, it occurred to me the other day that I actually don't know the kind of startup story of WildCard and sort of where you were and the context of when you started the business. So I felt like it'd be really interesting to find out, to start with, what happened.
Okay, well, I think what lies at the heart of WildCard is the value of personal relationships. And so I was working in agency. I've been there for about 8 years in a PR agency. And what I realised is that we had great client relationships. I was quite senior in the business 8 years in. We had good team relationships, good team culture, but there wasn't enough emphasis, I felt, placed on the importance of our media relationships. And I just felt a very obvious business opportunity was actually to set up my own agency where I would work on the sort of senior level media relationships as hard as we did on the clients and the team relationships. So this was the mid-90s. I set up from home with 3 clients that had a toy company, lovely wooden toys, which had nice stories to tell around play and early years education. I had a food brand that was about to launch, which is now still there actually, Merchant Gourmet, and a lighting design company as a client. And the lighting design, in those days, it was sort of thought that it was actually just about having a pretty lampshade. Actually, it's all about the effect and the design that you can achieve with light. So there's quite nice, challenging clients. And I worked very hard. It wasn't as easy as, might seem nowadays, but to actually establish really strong relationships with the national media, and delivered for my clients those sort of double page spreads, largely in the weekend press, because that's where the opportunities were. So it was the likes of the Times, the Guardian, the FT, the Telegraph, and the Independent. And funny enough, clients loved it. They stayed, more came along. And we incorporated in 2000, I was in London then, moved out of my home to an office. And in 2007, opened down here, came back home to Cornwall, which was wonderful. And about 4 years later, we opened an office in Bristol. But I think the whole sort of principle of being better connected and the importance of these connections is really what has lain at the heart of it ever since.
How easy was it back then to build relationships with the media?
It was, I think you had to think about what your story was. You couldn't just go in and ring them up. And they were, I think in those days, they're just getting, well, probably nowadays too, I know, you're still getting masses of phone calls. And you had to get traction. You had to, tease them with something interesting. I think once you got their trust, and I did quite a few press trips, which was actually quite a useful way. So, I went down to the south of France, to Camargue, and I had Nigel Slater, Jocelyn Dimbleby, Richard Earlett from The Guardian, and Henrietta Green from BBC Good Food. And so I made friends that way, and that was a really good way. And I think once you've got the friends and they know that they trust you, and ridiculously, you used us to send out press releases. That's how the core of it was these press releases. And I always use the same typeface. And they always say, I know when your envelope's coming, Kate, because it's this typeface, and they'd open it. So hopefully they now see our subject line in our emails, and they do the same.
It's not quite like following people on Twitter nowadays.
No, yeah. Back in the day, we endlessly putting things in envelopes and sealing them and stamping. We said like a franking machine.
There's something so nice about that, though, isn't there?
Well, yes.
Maybe that's what we need to do.
Hours spent doing that.
So we wanted to start off, I think, by talking about campaigns and how to do them really well from a PR perspective. And Judi, you have just this summer gone had what is probably a dream PR campaign, or a dream campaign full stop in a way, because you've had a brand new beach lofts opened at Watergate Bay.
So when you have something new and exciting like the beach lofts to talk about, yes, it is a gift. But we were able to leverage that opportunity to talk about the wider bay from very early on. So we worked with Georgie and Kate and the team from the end of, I get the right year, end of 2020, to craft that campaign, to think about the content, the words, the images, the films that we were going to use, and then think about exactly who we were going to target with those messages, and start dripping it out early in the year, leading then to the opportunity of hosting a series of media visits as soon as the beach lofts opened in May and June. So we had a whole series of people come to stay, which then, of course, did the work for us. It was interesting, Kate talking about those double-page spreads, and I'm sure we'll talk about double-page spreads, but they're still vitally important. And we had some extraordinary pieces. I don't know, at the same time as we were launching the beach lofts at Watergate Bay, Toby Ashworth was launching Sweets himself at the Nair, and we had a quite extraordinary double-page spread about the two differing opportunities to come and stay in Cornwall. It made for incredible reading, and also has had a fantastic life online. So it was a perfectly crafted campaign that delivered exactly what we wanted. Huge amount of interest, engagement, and in the end bookings, which is what we were after.
And that's sort of the story about both those opportunities. Is that something that you pitched?
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's pitching, but it's, I think what I would say to anyone is, I guess in PR, we are selling, but the clever bit is to sell without it feeling like a massive sell. So you're pitching, but you're pitching to a journalist who you understand what they're looking for. And that's when the beauty happens, because you have to know, I guess it's like if you're selling a car, isn't it? I mean, you've got to know who your audience is, and you know the right person for the right car. And it's the same thing if you're selling a concept of somebody who's going to come and experience the beach lofts at Watergate. It's got to be right for them, it's got to be right for their audience, the timing's got to be right, what are they interested in? And that's the bit, and then, yes, the pitching begins. But I mean, the lofts are, it is a PR gift. I'm not going to lie. You know, it's not a hard sell. Yeah. But, you know, we've worked with Watergate for a really long time, for years, and the brand has grown, and, you know, the relationships with the journalists have grown, and we sell them an idea, a concept. They come and experience it, and then when they experience it, that's when Kate's talking about trust. They come and they realise that, yes, okay, WildCard was selling me the right thing.
It was accurate.
Is right. We're not overselling. You know, you don't overpromise. You know, they come and they experience it, and that's when the magic happens. But
because I also think the secret of it is to actually make them feel engaged in the story and take. You know, it's not a Watergate-based story. It's my story. I'm writing it, and I've known about this for some time. And so we start talking to them quite early on and say, we actually got some really interesting developments happening, and what are you doing around this time? Will you, put it in your diary, and you just keep whetting the appetite. Actually, going back rather long time, I launched Goo a very long time ago, and we were 6 months out, and this guy
Goo chocolate puds.
Goo chocolate puds, sorry, for those who don't know Goo. But we were 6 months before launch, and James Arvedick, who's a very inspiring founder, had heard that we were the people to talk to, and he came in to see us, and he had nothing apart from some sort of samples in jars, and actually he was spelling it G-O-O, like gooey, and then he changed it to G-U umlaut because it looked a bit cooler, and he's absolutely right. But there was a way of just engaging key people, and I was in Hammersmith at the time. Nigella Lawson lived at the top of the road, and she was married to John Diamond, the journalist, and he was actually sadly really ill. But I knew that she had a thing about chocolate. And Joanne Harris, the author, who'd written this book, Chocolat, and then Orlando Murrin, who was the editor of BBC Good Food, and I knew he loved chocolate. So literally 6 months out, I said, I'm going to give you something really exciting, and they tried it in these sort of funny pots when it was called Goo, but they loved it, and they became part of the story, so that when you come to say, and now it's available, this is my product, I've helped with this, or these are my lofts, and I've been part of the story. And I think it's a bit of an art to do that. I mean, it's not rocket science, but if you can get them to think of it like that,
and it helps if the product's delicious.
It does help.
It does help. But we PR'd some real, less delicious things. It's probably worth saying
Let's not talk about
them. But it is about understanding. And your point actually about bringing journalists in so they are part of the story. I think there's nothing worse than and we've probably all been on the receiving end of quite a heavy sales phone call, and it's unpleasant, isn't it? But if you take a phone call and someone's easing you in and they're kind of whetting your appetite a bit, then you're part of that journey with them, and I think that does work. And even like today, I mean, that was Goo how many years ago? The same premise we still use today to bring journalists on in that journey with us, and they love it.
On that note, Judi, because I know that at one time you started introducing when guests come to Watergate Bay, you make sure they have a conversation with Will Ashworth.
Yes.
Is that something you still are doing with the beach lofts?
Yes, we absolutely did. I would say that most of the journalists who came to stay in the beach lofts knew us. Mm-hmm. The relationships that we developed with you over the years meant that we were talking to people who we'd consider almost friends or guests, not just journalists. And yes, it's not a condition of coming to stay, but it's really important that we have the opportunity to talk to them about everything that we've done, so that they have the full story and they have the opportunity to ask all the questions that they might want. We try and time that for once they've arrived, once they've had a chance to settle in, and they understand the experience, that they can then
they've got the right questions.
They've got the right questions to ask, and then they
not like, where are the facilities?
No, exactly, and then they meet Will.
Exactly, perfect.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Georgie, on a completely different kind of note, with something new with the beach lofts, I know you've got clients like Ginsters that you've worked with for a long time, and that was much more of a fundamental, it's a completely different challenge. Do you want to tell us a bit about how that worked from your perspective?
Yeah, I will. I will tell you, because I think it's a really good one. It's actually a really good one to talk about, because it couldn't be too different, could it?
No.
So you've got a product like Ginsters, which actually, they won't mind me saying it, but when we started working with them 6-7 years ago, and they'll admit it, they were very much white van man product. Okay, you went to the garage, you picked it up on the motorway, and it was seen very much as a food on the go product, and it did a job, and that was it. They were also very aware that they had some kind of serious issues around their quality credentials. People didn't actually really appreciate anything that kind of went into the product. So they came to us, and it's not just us, I'm not going to pretend it's just us, we worked with them on the storytelling. So they looked at the quality credential messaging, and it was all there, it just needed to be elevated. So really a kind of a 6-7 year journey of really focusing on the reasons to believe. They are made in Cornwall, they are made with British ingredients, red tractor farm assured meat, local farm stories, all this stuff that wasn't being said because actually they just weren't putting their head above the parapet. So yeah, like a whole world away from what we do with Watergate, but that's been a journey of time of working with our contacts. There's actually a really good story, and Claire's in the audience here, who there's a journalist called Tony Turnbull, who anyone who works in food will know. He's the food editor of the Times, and if you get him on side, then you're on to a total winner. But it takes a lot. He's not a fool. He doesn't take fools gladly. But we worked with him, and we were like, you've just got to try this new range of products. And we had created a partnership with Ginsters still to this day to work with Chris Eden, who I hope lots of people in this room know, so Michelin star chef, awesome, Cornish, and he went to Ginsters and he saw the work they were doing. So we had this third-party endorsement coming in from this wonderful Cornish chef and his new range. And this poor Claire had been literally talking to Tony Turnbull for about 2 years and was like, come on, Tony, you've got to try it, you've got to try it. And then suddenly this kind of, it all came together, didn't it, Claire? And it was this kind of wonderful moment of bringing Tony to try the product, meet Chris, meet the MD of Ginsters. And, but it wasn't just a story about Ginsters. I think that's the other thing to talk about, actually. We can dive into this quite a bit. But it's quite rare to get a standalone feature. It's not like a press strip where someone comes and stays and you've got a whole feature about a hotel. Gone are the days where you can have a whole feature just about one food product. Generally speaking, you need to go wider. So we were looking at food trends, and then you started looking at, okay, so you've got pasties. Well, what's a bit wider than pasties? Well, you can talk about pastry, you can talk about pies, and you can talk about the wider consumption of those types of foods. So yeah, anyway, I love the way I do that. Claire secured this double-page spread that everybody wants, and yeah, we did do it, and we've been on this wonderful journey with them, and I'm really proud to say that we work with Ginsters, and that they deliver great products for a variety of people, variety of reasons, and they've got really good stories to tell. So yeah.
I heard the other day they're in an unbelievable third of households in the UK.
Well, that's it, yeah, and believe it. I mean, it's absolutely true.
Absolutely so interesting, those kinds of stories, but also demonstrates the value of that longer term partnership. So if they'd said to you, you've got 6 months, then you wouldn't have been able to deliver what you have.
Yeah, I think that's exactly. I think with anything, PR is not, I mean, the beauty of PR now, because our storytelling isn't just traditional PR, you can use social and digital tools to go alongside it, where you can have immediate traction to go alongside your wider brand storytelling. And if we talk about the sales funnel, you talk about brand awareness, I mean, that's the role of PR. But if you want to create a shift in mindset, nothing's going to be overnight. You can't do anything overnight. Really it needs to be a gentle kind of progression. Ideally, we try and get people to work with this for a minimum of 6 months, so you can develop the story, develop the messaging, and take people, consumers, they need to be convinced. I mean, no one's stupid. You can't tell them stuff that isn't true. Ultimately, if you do, you're going to get found out. Yeah. So it's that lovely continual messaging with the reasons to believe, and we talk a lot about that with food products. What are the reasons to believe? What are the credentials that back those products up.
Underpin it.
Yeah.
Also, I think the interesting thing is that the media need to see it being talked about. So they all say they want their special story. And of course you angle something so they got something special. But actually they like to see the endorsement that their peers have been writing about it. So you can actually sit getting not much in for 6 months and thinking, help, we're pushing this gently or pushing this a bit hard, and it's starting to get traction. And then suddenly you have the snowball effect that actually they see that their peers are writing about whether it's the pasties, and they're rating it, so they say, oh, I must try this again. And it really does work.
It's like a critical mass.
Not that we tell them that was
everyone's writing about this. So the other thing with campaigns that I think is really interesting is this idea of when do you engage PR in a campaign conversation? So I think we probably, as marketers, are all potentially guilty of a little bit late in the campaign conversation, calling the PR agency and saying, "This is
I want a campaign tomorrow."
Or this is the campaign. Can you do the PR on this, please? Judi, when do you engage PR now? Or maybe when should we engage PR now?
So I hope that Georgie would say we're engaged with our PRs at all times. We have a very long-standing and ongoing relationship with WildCard. One of the things that we introduced, I think only 2 years ago, was an all-agency meeting. So I would say that you have to bring your PR agencies with you on the journey from the outset.
Sure.
Otherwise, how are they going to? They need to understand as well as you do what it is that the stories you're wanting to tell. So we meet every 6 weeks, and the very first question on our agenda is a business update, not a marketing update, a business update. How is the business performing? What's front of mind for us as a business, so that Georgie and the team know exactly where we are, and then all those initial conversations that we're having as a business, they're very quickly being reported back to our PR agency, so that they have it back of mind when it's in a embryonic state, but they're on the journey with us. I've now lost my thread on that one, but that's what we do.
I think it's so easy, isn't it? I think we've all experienced it in marketing, what's the marketing strategy? And you just think no, what's the business strategy? Let us respond to that. And how do we know, we could all tell a great big story about how great the marketing and the PR is, but whether or not it's delivering to the overarching objectives, unless we know what the business is trying to do, then we can't really explain. Tell me then, from your guys' perspective, from the PR side, you must have experienced it numerous times of, we have a campaign launching tomorrow, this is what we need you to do. Why is it so much more important that we get PR in right at the beginning when we say this is what we're trying to achieve?
Do you want to go first?
Okay. I think just taking it back a bit, PR has traditionally been seen as the poor relation, and we've been in our little silo. And when I first started out, there was the ad agency, now the creative agency, and they were God, and everybody listened to what they said, and no one listened to what we had to say. And actually, it has really transformed now, and it is really important. We are at the table with all the other agencies in the mix. We are very involved in that brand process. But I think what's Judi's point. We've got to be imbued with the business. We've got to understand it so we can actually tell the story. And I know we spend a lot of time with Judi and her team on that sort of content development and the tone of voice and getting that right. And that's so crucial. And it has to work across all platforms. And even if we're not directly involved in the social media or other aspects of it, sometimes we are, sometimes we're not, we need to be involved in those conversations. And I think there is now an understanding that we should be there. And in some instances, what we're doing now, even before we started working with clients, is actually we're involving them in our idea generation process. So we're actually inviting our clients to our brainstorms so they can be part of it, because equally it's that thing that they then actually start to take ownership and they understand where we're coming from. Because I think there is, and I'm sure everyone will be familiar with, you're told this is something and it's a great story, and actually it's not quite such a great story, but if you've been involved earlier on, you might be able to help make it into that great story.
I know what it was I
Go
was,
on, Judi.
I was saying. We'd started to have all agency meetings.
Yes.
Because we use Stranger Collective for strategy and content creation. But having it in silos, it's so much better if we're all together and we're all working towards an end goal together. So I would,
there's
including
just so
our
many channels
photographers
now, isn't
and
there?
everyone else. So.
Well, exactly.
Consistency is key, but with all the channels, it's no longer, you can't manage them. It's like a juggling act. Have you got your own view on when to engage?
I would say definitely as early as possible. The one caveat I would say is make sure your brand is ready for PR. So that's kind of almost going back another step. So we often do get phone calls from really exciting kind of brand owners who've got a new product, but it's just a bit early for that conversation. So the product needs to be ready. Ideally, it needs to have a listing of some kind. Consumers need to be able to get a hold of it. So that's probably the only watch out I would say. But just moving back into more of the kind of the everyday, I'm just kind of building on something that Kate said, is the beauty of kind of all agency working is you'll have, say for example, a kind of a creative platform that you're working to, and that's, that may have come together from the ad agency, the creative agency, input from the marketing team, the PR team, and then you've kind of got this lovely kind of moment when it works brilliantly together is actually when you can start to kind of, take out the pieces of the pie and see how it does work across these different channels. And I think the bit where PR agencies come in is that what we understand is that it's got to have a media lens on it. So what will work in advertising is not always what's going to work in editorial. And that's the bit that I think a marketing team sometimes will miss, because it's this sweet spot where you've got what the brand wants to say, which is really, really important. Of course it is. But it's also what the media are willing to hear about and to publish, because we are talking about earned media. So we have to persuade journalists, persuade the media to want to feature this. There's no money changing hands, so we're not paying for this space. So that's the clever bit, and that's where I think PR is really interesting, because we have to know that bit. We have to know what's going to land, what's of interest to the consumer, why contextually is it relevant for the media to talk about this now?
Yeah.
So there's no point, launching a product if it's not relevant to anybody. And it's the relevancy bit that we can do. And often you'll work with an ad agency, and I love the ad agency, I've got nothing against them, but they'll have a big budget that they can create a fantastic concept where they can stick it on an out-of-home billboard, paying for it to be there. Great. We don't have that luxury, so we can't take something, say to Tony Turnbull of the Times, and go, hey, feature this. He's going to be like, no, why should I?
Yeah.
So that's the skill. But then once you've got the fantastic brains and thinkings of the ad agency combined with our kind of input and knowledge, then then you've got great campaigns.
The combination.
Yeah.
On your point around being brand ready, I remember when we did a Meet the Media event with the journalists for the Marketing Forum a couple of years ago. And that's exactly one of the points they were making, is what is the point in us featuring, I think they'd featured a great big lodge in Scotland. And they said they weren't open for the month after they'd been featured. And it was the Sunday Times. And you just think, oh my God.
Yeah.
That's an absolute flop, really, isn't it?
And the Sunday Times, they're the ones who get the flack about it too,
Yeah.
so they're very sensitive about it.
Yeah.
So you owe it to your journalist friends to make sure that, that product, whether it's a room in a hotel or something on a shelf, is there and ready to be taken.
And that also shows the importance of connecting operations as much as marketing, PR, comms, ad agencies. It's the whole collection, isn't it?
It is, but I think that's that's where the marketeers come in, isn't it? So a marketeer will bring us in, when it's working beautifully, the product will be ready, and the kind of the brand book is done, and the messaging is pretty much there. Then our job is to come in and take it and adapt it for media.
Sure.
So I think that's the bit, and develop the stories. Yeah, dive in and find out what the stories are. Yeah.
So
Can I add one other bit?
Yes, you may.
It just reminded me, like this warts and all comment, which I had sitting at the back of my mind, is that the agency needs to know everything, warts and all.
Yeah.
We need to be prepared. We need, and I think there was another, I keep talking about these old-fashioned views, that if you tell the agency it's going to appear in the newspaper the next day, it's obviously not. But if we have to understand what issues you've worked against and whether there might be something that's potentially coming over the hill that we're a bit worried about, so we can be prepared to either deflect it or to respond to it. And it's sharing the bad news as well as the good news.
I've definitely had situations where I've been told news, don't tell anyone, and I'm like, it's okay, I can tell the PR agency. Because it's almost, of all the people that we're going to tell, if we don't tell the PR agency, then, who's going to have our back?
Yeah.
So I think another really interesting area to talk about now is who's going to tell our stories. So that idea of PR no longer just being about, I was going to say the double page spread, but let's start with that because it's an interesting place to start. Judi, why, so the double page spread is like the pinnacle, nirvana. Why has it still got so much power?
So if you look at our Google Analytics and see where our traffic comes from for Another Place hotels particularly, you'll see an article from the Telegraph that was written 3.5, I'm looking at Heidi, 3.5, 4 years ago, that's delivering today traffic to our site. So that came from a double page spread written in the first week that we were open, that then went online. Interesting, gets updated on a regular basis. Thank you very much, the Telegraph, for doing that for us. With a link to our, backlink to our website, and that authority that they have, the visibility they have, is delivering a new audience to us today, and I can show direct conversion to sales from that. So, chasing print. Yes, chasing print for print's sake, no. But chasing the right print for the online versions, absolutely, and incredibly important. You also just remember that the journalists that we're talking about here are A-list journalists who, as advocates and ambassadors in their own right, have individual authority and influence. So there's lots of reasons still to be focused on that A-list broadsheet.
Do you think it's the fact that it goes digital, which is why it's got the value now?
It's an incredibly important element of what we're thinking about, yes. Yeah.
And what about the board?
Oh. Do you know what? I almost came out of my mouth before you said it.
Because we all know what the board wants.
I think the visibility, newspaper visibility, is still incredibly important, and the value of being able to show those. Yes, of course, there's an internal communications piece, but a double-page spread, it's lovely to have, isn't it? But actually, most of us will read that article online.
Sure.
And the wonderful thing about an online version is it can be corrected. Thank you very much. Whereas something in print.
But there is still something so special about getting print coverage, isn't there?
Absolutely.
And do you guys get that sense of excitement when you land it?
Oh, huge. I remember we did the Watergate feature for the Telegraph magazine. It was Neil on the front.
Yes.
Yes, and that was with Rose prints. That was amazing. And you felt that's what we've been working for.
Yeah, and it takes months.
Yeah.
I mean, it's months in the making. I mean, the online equivalence, it's still months in the making. But if I dare say it, with double page spreads, seeing as we're talking about it, I do often feel, yes, I mean, they can be the kind of things that it can sell your business, as in, like, you can show it to people. It sells our business. We can say, look, aren't we great PRs? But often they can be also ego pieces.
Sure.
So when you talk about the board, yes, it makes people feel good, like this is where I'm spending my money. But you could definitely have a whole argument about is that actually shifting? Is that shifting sales, or is it the online version which is actually making is that the bit that's shifting the dial? And actually, funny enough, I was talking about kind of travel PR. you'll often see in the kind of the weekend or in the dailies, it'll have like the little columns, and it'll have probably like 5 things, book now, do this. And actually those are often the bits that have huge amount of kind of results. We can have a client call up and go, my God, that one, we've had 5 bookings off the back of that, because actually it's much easier to read than a double page spread, because you're looking again, God, that's beautiful, but I'm not going to read it. What people do read are those little nuggets.
Sure.
So it's complementary. You're going for the big ones because that's your big kind of hero piece, going to have that lovely long tail piece online, but those kind of quick wins are then there. So it's the whole package.
And then from your perspective, Kate, is there an educational piece then with clients where, or, obviously if people are coming to you and saying, this is what we want, but is there that educational piece around saying, totally get it, but equally, as to Georgie's point, these are also going to do real...
Hugely. And obviously some clients are easier to, not that they need to be educated, but some clients are easier to work with than others. And we've all been with those individuals who are absolutely sure that what they've got is the greatest story ever. And you have to say, perhaps not quite like that, but have you tried it like this? And there is, it's a big educational thing. And you've got to get the trust of the clients so they understand that actually what we're saying is something that they should listen to and not sort of ignore. So there is a big education piece.
I was just going to say, of course, we've already agreed with WildCard who we are approaching and who we aren't approaching.
With regard to the actual print media journalists?
Yes, exactly that. So you've already looked at your demographic, you've looked at the journalists who you want to speak about, and those are the people that you're approaching anyway.
Sure, so it's not like a random
no.
machine gun blitz of who'll take it.
Yeah. I think actually that's a really important point to raise, because every feature, no matter what publication, takes time to nurture and create.
Sure.
The big pieces, the small pieces, the Times, the Sun, wherever it is right. But ultimately, that time and investment into landing something, if there's not going to be a benefit, we talk about coverage for coverage sake. Do not secure coverage just for the sake of it, because we can get really excited, go, hey, look, client, look what we've got for you. And they're like, that's really great, but my God, my audience won't read that.
No.
So it's especially, I think, when people start out in PR, you're kind of almost going after anything, and just like, whoa, just slow down. Less is more. I'm always telling you, less is more. I'd rather you were focusing on 4 publications and you land one of them. I don't want to see hundreds of bits of coverage in rubbish publications that no one cares about.
Oh dear. Oh God, it's depressing.
You should try working with me.
I don't want to. Right, so I think the other thing that we need to talk about when we talk about stories and who's going to tell our stories is clearly, I don't want to use the word influencers, but I am going to. Influencers. Obviously, this has now become quite a big part of PR and the PR responsibility, what we see as incorporated within PR. I think, Kate, it's interesting, I think, to start from a company perspective. You've had to probably diversify your team's skill set quite considerably in order to be able to...
I think it's about sort of 5 or 6 years ago, we made a significant investment in a digital team. So I had a digital, a creative, a social media manager. We've now got others under that. And it was, and I don't think I would have been able to set up WildCard now, because I set it up, on my own with one laptop, and you need to have that resource. So it has required, it has transformed the face of PR. And I think before we talk about influencers, which I know Georgie's got some very good things to say, but I think we've got a lot of other people out there saying, I can do influencers, I can, because effectively they're offering them for sale.
Sure.
So anyone can go out and just buy them. But actually, if the editorial relationship doesn't sit, if it's not authentic, doesn't sit at the heart of it, it's not going to work. But so we're sort of struggling with that challenge as well. It doesn't sit completely in the PR field.
Well, I guess what you're talking about, though, is almost like an unstrategic approach to influencers. It's the equivalent of machine gunning down coverage.
Yeah.
It's sort of, I'll take any influencer with any channel, whether or not my audience is there or not. Exactly. Whereas I think what PR about is obviously like highly strategic, targeted.
Yeah.
Judi, so I know you guys have been through a whole change, I suppose, in how you work with influencers over the last, how many years? It's
four,
still
5? Yeah, 4 or 5 years that
And you started
influencers.
off like dipping a toe?
Yes, we did. We were absolutely talking about that today.
Yeah.
So I suppose we take exactly the same approach to creating a list of influencers, a hit list, a short, well thought through list of influencers who we feel may be able to tell our stories authentically for us, and then targeting them, both our team and WildCard.
You double up?
Yes, we do, because we have some direct relationships ourselves with people. But when it came to launching Another Place, The Lake, I think that was the very first time that they were a strategic part of the people that we wanted to come and have stay and tell our stories. And we had some real success in an early stage. We were talking today about Hand Luggage Only, who came to stay and who told our story beautifully at the time through social media and their blog. But they've continued to tell our story for us and resurfaced content that they produced back then. Actually, this week, it's just come up again. So the long tail of that too. When you get it right, when you've got a relationship right, and you've invited someone who's truly going to enjoy the brand experience you want to give them, then that kind of partnership has long-term benefits.
And Georgie, so tell me about, from your perspective then, those kinds of relationship buildings that you need to do now with influencers and ambassadors.
Yeah, and then I think you could also divide them up, couldn't you? So you've got influencers who, and this is again what we're chatting about today, you've got professional influencers, I guess, who are doing it for a living, and you have to respect that now. So yes, you've kind of got like part-time bloggers and part-time Instagrammers, and they're doing it on the side, and great. But you've also got individuals who've been doing it now, whether it's 6 months or 6 years, but they are investing their entire life into doing it. And when I say you have to respect that, what I mean is that you have to pay for their time. So
Sure.
I think gone are the days, when you would say, oh, we'll just do an organic influencer drop, and you kind of like send it out and hope for the best, and you get some nice pickup here and there and some not. I think, what we've learned over time, and this is, trial and error, as a lot of things are in life, aren't they? I mean, you realise, just like we do with editorial journalists, you nurture the relationships, you find out who is right for your client, for their audience, and we've got fantastic tools which allow us to look right into kind of the back end and who is looking at their content and how much time are people spending on it, what is the return on investment to our client in order to do that. But you put spend into it, because unlike editorial, where there is an element of control because it's through the newspaper, what I would argue with an influencer is that you have essentially a paid agreement. So rather than say the Times journalist, where you do have an understanding, you have an agreement before they come on a press trip, with an influencer, you're making an agreement with them because you do want some control. And I think that's the bit that Kate's talking about, is actually the influencer piece starts falling out of what we would have said traditional earned media. It's not necessarily kind of traditional PR, but you've got the PR element because we understand the editorial conversations which need to come out through the influencer, and we're using the influencer because we want to get into their audience profile. But then there is the contractual piece that goes with it. And all those bits do need to work together, I would say. And yes, there is definitely still scope out there for organic gifting and organic relationships and contra deals, especially you have beautiful hotels, and not always money needs to change hands. But ultimately, if you work with the influencers, you also want them, you can't just pay them to write for you. You've got to make sure that they like your brand. I think that is a mistake to think, oh, I want them, they're going to write something great, because then it's not authentic,
No.
and their audience will see through it.
Sure.
I'd say I'm sure people have seen Father of Daughters.
Oh, yeah.
And he does quite a lot of interesting ads actually, and I follow him. And he did one recently. It doesn't matter the name of the brand, but I kind of felt good for him. You know, very clearly said it was an ad, but my God, he got totally slated for it because his audience were just like, "Sorry, mate, you've just gone too far." So it is. You know, you've got to kind of just really be careful because it's your brand who's going to get affected if you've just taken that influencer just a little bit too far. So it's got to seem real and authentic, and it's got to feel that they are right for the brand. So.
Sure. And I think that longevity of relationship that you're talking about, that is still continuing on, and she's still updating and coming to you for more information. But some of the brands that we work with, it's a Manilife peanut butter we work with, and they have what's called their Manilifers, which are they work. And the whole purpose of that is it is an ongoing relationship that these individuals, and they might have been paid to start off with, and now it's possibly a little bit more just on the journey with us. But it's very much seen as a long term.
Sure.
Keeping the relationship going.
Judi, I think the other point with influencers is the opportunity to kind of reflect on who we get to tell our stories. Is that something you've proactively looked at from Watergate Bay or Another Place Hotels perspective?
Absolutely. So what do we want? As Georgie said, you can't prescribe what a journalist is going to write, and you don't actually know a great deal about that journalist and what they think and feel, whereas with an influencer, I know they're living their best life on social media, but you have real clarity about who they are and what they're interested in, which allows us then to work really at quite a granular level to develop an experience, a stay for them that's actually unique and highly differentiated from another influencer. So it's really important when we're looking for the year and we're saying here's our target list, that group of people are diverse in their interests and their approach, whether they're coming with a family or they're not, or they're coming on their own. And then what we work with them to develop as their stay, their experience with us, which is it's actually quite a lot of fun. But then you get truly individual stories being told about our hotel as a location for their genuine, authentic holiday experience.
So effectively, you're not telling the same story over and over.
It's really, really important that you don't tell the same story over and over again. What you were saying about the media, so say the Times tell the story and then everyone else wants to tell the story, it can actually get quite repetitive, whereas there are genuinely different stories that can be told when you choose your influencers wisely.
So it's a great opportunity to diversify who's telling the story from their perspective, their lived experience.
Yes, yeah. We've had two brothers. Sorry, tell me the brothers who came to.
Yeah, three brothers.
Three brothers. The swimming brothers.
They're multiplying.
The wild swimming brothers have been to stay at the lake. And open water swimming is absolutely a key component of what we do. So the wild swimming brothers, they're almost athletes, we would say, but they brought their mother to stay with them.
That's adorable.
But what a unique experience that they've told. So three of them and her, she's doing exactly the same as they are, but through a different lens.
Sure.
And I think that's incredibly engaging and speaks to a lot of different people within our demographic.
Sure.
So
I think also from a creative perspective, you can sit and you can plan an entire campaign, and whether that's PR, marketing, whatever, but it's those kinds of humans that make it, they take it. You would never have thought, bring your mother. No. You wouldn't have done that. But actually then the story that ends up being told is so much more engaging.
Absolutely.
Because of that point of difference. So the last thing I think we should just talk about, because it's the title, is the power of PR. So I'm really interested in all of your different perspectives on why is it so powerful. So Kate, tell me what your perspective is around why does PR work so well?
Well, I think it's the opportunity to really sort of dissect a brand or a product and really tell the story in a meaningful way.
Sure.
You can pull out all the different aspects around that business or that brand, which actually you can never do in an ad or a bit of shopper marketing. So it's a really in-depth opportunity, and content sits at the heart of everything, and good editorial content is what we are expert in. And I think that is the key. That's why you need PR.
For me, Georgie, like when you're talking about the ad agencies, and we love them, but when you're talking about the ad agencies and the idea of those great big billboards, almost PR is the credibility to that budget. It's the authenticity, because it's not you spending the money on the billboard saying we're brilliant. It's somebody else saying they're brilliant.
Yeah, that's it. And it goes back to, a bit of marketing kind of basics, isn't it? What have you got going on? And when you talk about the paid and the earned and the owned, and ultimately this is third-party endorsement. I mean, that's the beauty of it. I mean, it ruined my life once I worked in PR. I could never read an article again. I was like, oh God, really? Are you recommending that, or does that come from a PR? I mean, but anyway, that aside, I think that if you've got a journalist and they are independent, they know they're not going to write it if they don't believe it, and that's the beauty of it, isn't it? So you've got an independent journalist writing something, reviewing something, and you have to take, the good and the bad. You opening up your hotel to a review, they're not telling you they're going to come and write a good review, and things do go wrong.
Sure.
Likewise with products, you can send a food product and, you can get scored 0 out of 5, and then that's sad days for everybody. I mean, that does happen.
the phone that day.
Yeah, exactly. So, but that is the power of PR. That's exactly it, isn't it? It's editorial, and generally speaking, if you've got a good product and you believe in what you're selling, or you find your way of getting it in. And we haven't actually spoken about that today, but there are brands that don't have great stories to tell. I mean, we have to create stories, and that's when you use a different type of PR. But generally speaking, that third-party endorsement is what really helps. For me, that is the power of PR on top of any advertising campaign.
What about from your perspective, Judi?
I would agree entirely with them both. If you think about how many words you'd use in an advert and how complex a story and message we have to tell, the power of almost the long read and the ability to show images and film within that now. It's so powerful in terms of storytelling that we don't advertise. A little.
Bit of cheeky advertising.
Bit of cheeky advertising here or there. But PR is at the heart of our marketing strategy. I mean, it takes the most of our budget, and it has delivered, and we're able to measure what it delivers for us. So.
And then sort of just taking that one step further then, in terms of best deployment of PR, long term, always?
Me?
What do you mean? As in, like, you can
ideally.
do like, sure, yeah, ideally.
Yeah.
I think if you
we
have,
would always say long term.
yeah,
Yeah, but I
you
think,
need that.
but we do
commitment.
quick hits too.
Yeah.
So
Because that's the way to get in. That's the way
Sure.
to
It's
prove
both, I
that it can
suppose,
work.
then.
Yeah.
Judy looked like she was going to...
No, I was just thinking about it. I would suggest you don't start and stop your marketing. You don't start and stop communicating with your audiences. You dial it up, you dial it down. And we have short, sharp, tactical campaigns to do certain things.
Sure.
WildCard have just put out a press release today to local media to let them know that we've opened a co-working space here. That will be a very short-lived campaign.
Sure, yeah.
And I would say that our PR agency is here through the good and the bad. You need people who've got your back if something isn't going swimmingly well. So I think it's a constant, but it is an ebb and flow of storytelling and business cycle. Actually, business cycle.
I think crisis PR is a whole other conversation.
we could have a whole session about that. But can I just quickly talk about short-term PR, because actually, we've been talking quite a lot today about long-term campaigns and how long some stories can take to develop. But actually, just an example is because you've mentioned it, I will now tell you. So I think it was 4 weeks before we were coming out of lockdown. It was kind of early summer, and we got a call from Carex. So Carex hand gel, hand wash, and they were like, we need a campaign, we're coming out of lockdown, we want it in 4 weeks. And you can imagine us going, oh my God.
No problem.
Yeah, sure, we can do that. Christ, what do we do? But, we did in 4 weeks turn around, and we essentially,
You did a stunt,
We
didn't
did
you?
a stunt.
You did a stunt.
And we had people jumping out of an aeroplane, and we actually set a world record for Guinness World Record. It was properly adjudicated, and it was the amount of times you could touch your hands in the air. And obviously the messaging was all about the benefits of touching hands, because you could touch hands thanks to Carex. But that was a hard, fast, sharp campaign. They wanted, absolute cut through, landing on one particular day, and we delivered it. So that you can do things hard and fast, but what's the golden rule there is, my God, there's not much manoeuvring when something goes wrong. If that doesn't land, you're like, oh, yeah. Very good, yeah. Literally, luckily that was all fine.
Yeah, right.
But yes, so there is that kind of stuff that happens as well as the more kind of long.
Actually, talking about that short-term thing, because I was there sitting a bit on the outside, is what really worked well is the client was completely engaged in the process from the beginning. So they were involved, they've got to turn it around quickly. So we're not going to go away and, you are involved in the idea generation process. So they were involved throughout. And it really, I think that was a secret to how we managed to turn it around.
I think to make something work fast is exactly, normally you'd go away and you'd bring in the strategists and the planners and the creatives, and then, you've got this lovely process, but, we didn't have that.
And who do we blame for this idea?
What, the last minuteness of it?
No, the COVID. The plane. Is that you guys that had to come up with that?
Yeah, no, it was totally us. Yeah, and it worked.
I know, I saw the coverage.
In case no one saw it, go Google it.
No, we always saw. It worked.
Yeah, it did work.
Judi, have you ever done a stunt for Watergate Bay or another place?
A stunt. Have any of you seen the horse-drawn horse on the beach at Watergate Bay? That's a stunt.
That was awesome.
That was unbelievable. When GWR was sponsoring polo on the beach, they created a short film to promote the event, and we used 2 horses to film basically the horses drawing a horse on the beach.
Sand art.
So do go and see it. It's on YouTube. It's wonderful.
They were without riders as well. They just authentically decided.
No, you can see the riders.
That's a whole other story.
Yeah. And of course, Eden have done some fantastic stunts on the beach too. The gorilla. Yeah. So yes, we've been able to use the beach.
Yeah, well, that's the advantage of Watergate Bay, isn't it? You've got all that sand there. Thank you so much for joining us, ladies. It's been so wonderful to have this conversation and understand the different perspectives and the stories of the power of PR. So huge thank you, and I really hope that you guys all got value. Thank you very much.
Thank you.